A while back, we did a pretty cool video on what makes a DAC a good DAC or a bad DAC. And of course, when you say a good bad DAC or a bad DAC, you think about the Wicked Witch from the Wizard of Oz. Are you
Of course.
A good witch or a bad
That's
DAC?
Just because you say that all the time is why I'm
I
thinking.
know, I'm just used to it. Yeah. So it's in my head too much. But today, let's talk about what makes an amp good or bad. And I mean, since we're in the headphone space, I guess specifically headphone amplifiers,
I guess it goes hand in hand with either or.
it's pretty similar.
Sort of the same thing.
Yeah.
But I do think there's quite a lot here to talk about. And I think, especially for newcomers to the sport, it really has a bit more into it than I think you might imagine. So we'll hopefully try to talk about the pros and cons of different approaches, the things to think about and consider, and the reasons why you would buy one amp over another. This is sort of general information, of course, not really nailed down to a specific thing because there's a lot of amps. But yeah, we'll start with, I guess, the simple one. You do have very wide ranges in price. So
That's for sure.
that's a complicated thing, though, because people say this is good and bad online. But they
You could
may
probably
be
get a portable
looking
headphone
for
amp for like $20
cheap,
if you wanted
really
to.
cheap, yeah. And you could spend
Like a
thousands.
dongle.
That's the issue, right?
Yeah.
So is it bad that it's $20? Is it bad that it's $2,000? It's very subjective.
Well, I'd go the American way and go by weight. I think that separates the men from the boys right away.
Well, actually, you got to start at square one here.
yeah.
It needs to work in your application, so
Yeah,
it
well,
needs to
that's
have
true.
enough power. So
Well, let's start with that.
yeah, that.
Okay, well, first of all, make sure it's a amp that's made for headphones. The one. Two, you're right. On not all headphones.
No.
But like I know, particularly on ours for sure. Because
Well,
we have-
kind of, because you could have the other problem too. You want something that's like really low noise for an IEM, so you don't need a lot of power. You specifically don't want a lot of power.
Right.
So
Your requirements could change dramatically depending on the headphones you're using it with, and to some extent the source you plan on using. It could be you want to use it with your phone, and maybe it has a built-in DAC. Maybe it's a form factor, a size that's advantageous for your application. Maybe it's battery powered.
We should probably cover each one of those with a go. Let's start with power since he brought up power.
Power,
Yeah,
yeah.
let's do power.
Right.
So okay, power. Right. IEMs tend to be very sensitive. In other words, they don't need a lot of power.
However, that's a difficult one. And we have a video on this. Maybe we'll link it up in a card. But there's a bit more to sensitivity than just impedance or the actual sensitivity rating. Because sometimes people sort of lump sensitivity or ease of driving, how difficult the headphone is to actually power, with its impedance or its actual sensitivity rating. They kind of sort of use them interchangeably. But that's a bit of a messy way to do that. And I think we talked about it in another
Yeah,
video.
we did, and we could try to link to that. But the question is, what makes the amp good or bad? So in the case,
Well, if you're looking in a selection process and you're
Yeah.
looking
Right.
to understand the power, it is a very important thing to understand whether or not it's going to work for your application.
well, that's the first thing, is certainly from the headphone manufacturer. Maybe ask them or whoever's selling the headphone is how much power does this headphone require, or have an idea.
that's the thing. It's so much easier in like speaker world because usually it's like you get like grand utopias and you're thinking, oh, a 2-watt tube amp would probably do. I mean, obviously not, right? But in headphones, they're all like the same size, so you can't
Yeah.
really tell by look.
That's
Oh,
true.
that headphone needs a lot of power. or
You go
something.
speakers that are like desktop,
Yeah,
and you
right.
got ones that are 6 foot high, and obviously you tend to need power when you get to 6 foot with speakers that large, right? Yeah, it's hard. It is harder to gauge. But anyway, that aside, all right. Let's say, okay, we know that you have a very sensitive IEM. Therefore, you're looking for probably an amp that's a good amp, but doesn't necessarily have to have 10 watts out or something like
Right.
that.
You're looking for milliwatts.
Yeah, and the reason is because with sensitivity comes it's sensitive to noise issues too. So when you get to be bigger amps, you have bigger power supplies, you have more electronics, which inherently gives you a kind of a higher level of, let's call it, electronic noise. And you might hear something like a hiss or something, which people pick out on amps on a high sensitivity earphone or yeah. But with like low sensitivity like ours, you won't hear any of that. You've got to have a certain level before you begin to hear that kind of stuff.
That's definitely a point to bring up because it typically is the case that the higher power amplifiers also have a bit of a higher noise floor. It's not universal, but as a general rule, it's along those lines because it's very difficult to lower the noise floor while also massively increasing power. So if there's an amplifier that's very high power, it's unlikely it's going to work well for a very, very sensitive
We're
headphone.
talking very little noise too. It's not like
Oh
it's,
yeah,
Yeah.
it's trivial.
it's
Exactly.
not like this thing's sitting there humming or anything.
Yeah.
We're talking about there's just that's typical. That's what electronics do.
Right.
And tube amps are like that too. And solid state and tubes similar. Tubes are even trickier at lower levels because now you're at the mercy of the tube you're using. You could change a tube,
Right.
and that tube's noisier than the other tube. You know, where solid state you don't have that option. With the transistors that are in there are what's in there, but with tubes you got to watch it. So they actually will. I think some of the places, like I know Upscale Audio sells tubes, and I think they actually measure them, and they'll either give you a noise rating or tell you it's really low. Or I don't know, they got like, you know, there's somewhere I know choosing from them was nice when I was buying tubes for like this amp.
Yeah,
or for,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
But it's a pro and a con though, because like with a solid state amp, if it's noisy, then it's noisy, right? But I guess you can't actually change it with a tube amp, which is kind of good and kind
Maybe.
of bad.
Depends on
Maybe,
tubes you use
yeah.
as
it
the
depends.
design.
But either way, you don't
Yeah.
tend to not see people using tube amps on IE
Right.
in-ears, you know.
As a broad rule, it seems to be a good bet not to use things or not plan on using things at the extremes. So if you have an amplifier, it's rated 8 watts or whatever, don't plan on getting 8 watts out of it all the time. You're pushing it too hard, right?
Okay.
And also don't get an 8-watt amp to take 5 milliwatts out of it, right? 'Cause either way on that end, you're probably operating the amplifier on the edges of its design, and it most likely won't be the best performance.
Yeah, but I think we went on a tangent because really it's again that really doesn't answer the question: what makes a amp good or bad?
Well, it's a complicated one.
Yeah, but that's part
yeah,
of it.
That's
That's
a
part of it.
big
Yeah.
part.
Power.
That's,
That's
it needs
a
to
big one.
If you
work.
have too much noise for the
Right.
device, or too much or too little power for the device, that's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Because
So,
if it doesn't work, it's a bad amp, right?
yeah, right, yeah, right,
Right,
right.
so-
Even though it might be a perfect,
Right. It might be great
But
for other
in
things.
another application.
It's also not the same. More power is always better. For very hard to drive headphones, like especially ours and a few others,
Most of the flagships like power.
you tend to get more performance with higher power headphone amplifiers, but that's not universal.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff that there's no benefit.
Well, the increased in power, one thing that does is it does give you more of a what they call it an overhead dynamic, higher dynamic abilities. The amp's not going to run out of steam at any level you're playing, you know. And if you get some music that just happens to have something that really kicks in,
Right.
some of
Yeah.
the classical stuff can vary from dead quiet to like full out ensemble.
Well, I mean, especially if you're listening to stuff like that, and you tend to listen at loud volumes anyways.
Yeah.
You want as much power as you
You're,
can get
you're,
usually.
you're going to
yeah.
need some power there or something to back it, you know. Otherwise,
Yeah.
what happens is the amp sounds like it's running out of power. It stalls. It can clip, make funny noises, distort, or just sound wimpy. Like
Yeah.
you know how a real drum sounds when someone hits a drum in front of you, boom, you know, like a kick drum, right? And that actually is in part the amplifier's job to reproduce that. By all means, the headphones have to be able to play it too, but to reproduce a kick drum, that's tough. And you see how they mic these things. They usually
Yeah.
shove a mic right by it, so the mic's picking it up. So it's just a question of, you know, how to play that massive amount of energy at low frequencies back and be able to hear it.
I think for me, the next thing in the chain that I would look for, besides sonic character, which of course tends to be universal for everything, you want everything to sound good, but I think we'll leave that to the end because these other points are probably
Yeah.
more important for the selection process
Right.
for now. I think the next bet is overall the design, the style, the size, the shape, what type of amp it is. Is it tube? Is it solid state? You know, what topology is it? How many knobs and switches and buttons? Does it have the features you need? Because there's a wide range here.
Yeah, you could see just like what's in front of us
Yeah,
here.
there's just a handful.
This is a Pathos in Polaire. It's an Italian app, and you know Italians got their own look going.
Yeah,
They're
well,
completely
yeah.
different from your typical, you know, Asian designs here with you know typical square boxes, black.
But it needs to appeal to you. It
Yeah.
needs to have the inputs and outputs you need. And that does include whether or not you plan on using balance. Do you want an amplifier that could do it all, that has a wide range of capabilities, that has balanced and single ed, that has 6 different connectors on it?
Well, you just
This is
need
very
one.
important.
Some
Right.
people that
Maybe you
are
don't care, you
basic,
just need one. Yeah.
you know, just want it
Maybe
to
in
work.
fact you want one. Maybe you want the simplicity, like something like this. You want a smaller package that's more simple. You don't want 500 switches. Depends on your taste there, and there's a lot of options. So it's really hard to make a sweeping generalization just by reading reviews on the internet and saying, well, this is the one to buy, because they're narrowing it down for them. But oftentimes you have criteria that's a little different.
Well, especially if you have more than one headphone, different cables, different connectors on them. different impedances and
It almost requires
sensitivities.
more
yeah.
than 1 amp.
Yeah.
Like I remember saying it a while ago in one of our earlier videos, is you want to have a few amps. You know what I mean? There's nothing like having a few amps to be
It's
able to
very
switch
difficult
between.
to
you
get it
know,
with one.
Yeah, it is. It is. Now, if you're just running mainly one headphone and the other ones are for
Right.
whatever, okay, I get that. Some people have different headphones for portable use, for home. So in that case, yeah, expect to have. Bottom line is expect if you're going to mix it up like that, where you run, like you run an IM for portable and you run a big full size headphone for desktop. Expect to have multiple sets of electronics. It goes for anything. We found the same thing with home theater and 2-channel speaker, right?
Mhm.
Stereo.
Yeah.
You try to make one work with the other, it doesn't really work.
If you're very experienced and you know everything, it's possible you can get it, but you really need to know all the hardware to understand all the optimizations to get it dialed right in. It is very difficult to make one system work for a wide range of headphones.
Or you're just good with the compromise.
Yeah,
it's like, well,
that too, I guess.
it's compromised in home theater or it's compromised in 2-channel.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you steer it. You
Yeah.
focus it on your main objective,
Right.
and then it is what it is for
Right.
the other ones.
Yeah, but if you're doing something like gaming and listening to music, you got to question how much am I going to spend listening to music? How much do I care about that? How much do I care about gaming? Because a lot of times you could get away with a much lower quality amplifier for something like gaming. Really doesn't matter nearly as much. The fidelity and the resolution is way less critical and less noticeable.
And for a lot of people too, the appearance doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Size usually becomes more of an issue than appearance. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I need it to be so small to fit on
Right.
a desk, or
That's
I don't
very
care how
common.
big it is because I got a full size rack.
Right.
Sometimes
so-
you want it to be big and look impressive.
Yeah, right.
And then you might want to go to a tube amp that looks cool.
Especially when you're spending the big bucks. You look at like the Woo Audio, the WA33, like for
Right.
it's a 62-pound amplifier. That
It's big.
with the tubes, it stands about probably about 15 inches high.
That's true.
It's full rack width. It's probably 16 wide. That's a serious. Now that's a serious headphone amp.
Well, yeah, the test for something like that is you show someone that knows nothing about headphone amps, and they would probably be like, "Well, that I don't even know what that is." Right? It's like that. I've never seen anything.
You
like
wouldn't
that.
guess it's $50.
like a spaceship.
Yeah.
To some people, it's important to make a statement. So there's
Yeah.
options like that.
Yeah.
But of course, it's pretty easy to figure that one out for yourself.
Mm.
And that's one thing to consider too. I mean, let's go to the sonic traits, which to me really separates how to pick a good amplifier from a bad. You have to listen
Oh,
to
so
it.
let's say you already have all the other criteria picked out.
Yeah.
It
You
powers
narrowed
it
it
fine.
down.
It's the size you want.
It's within a price range you deem acceptable.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
But this is honestly a complicated one. And I think people, again, oversimplify sonic character of amplifiers. And they'll say, wow, this sounds wonderful. The trouble with that is you need to question their experience level, because it could be that to them, it's the best sounding amp they've ever heard. However, how many amps did they hear? What other headphones, what
Yeah.
other bits of gear did they listen to it with? Because it could be that their headphone has a flaw, or some other element in their chain has a flaw. And this amplifier has
Just
some,
happened to
yeah,
fit.
it has some sort of attribute that fits in to make that flaw less noticeable.
In audio, we call it striking a balance. So so you're basically, relatively speaking, if you have something that's in the system, let's say by flaw you mean it's either bright or dark, or
Right.
doesn't have the spectral balance.
Really,
you're
everything
looking
is
for.
flawed. It's just a question of
Yeah.
how severely,
And,
right?
and that's the way a system is assembled. Really, is it's an assembly of flaws that just happen to work together.
Correct. That's a way to put it. It's
Yeah.
not so attractive,
Yeah.
but
Well, the idea is, if you want a perfect system, is obviously to systematically eliminate the flaws
Well, yeah.
step by step, and that takes time. You got to know what you're doing. You could be
Right.
done, and you're going to rock through some gear to do it.
Well, it comes with an amp. You have to try it in your current system, right? To see
You
if
really
it works
do.
for you. So
With
you
your
have to work
ears.
your headphones,
It's
your
the best
DAC.
way to go.
I mean, we were just talking about this. Actually, it's like microwaves, right? Perfect example, right?
okay.
Okay, go with me here.
Sure.
Okay.
Is it LG
No,
microwave?
no. Keith was talking about how he has a specific time he cooks his pizza rolls at in the microwave. He's like 1 minute 47 seconds, and he says that's how everybody should cook them. But that won't work because all
Only
microwaves
for
are
his
different.
microwave.
So
And his plate and his orientation.
that's right.
And he'll find
His
out when he gets
temperature
rid
of frozen
when that-
pizza pockets.
So you got to reevaluate your specific time for your pizza rolls
Yeah,
Mm.
in
Yeah.
your situation.
yeah.
Mm.
And then I would imagine you're talking about frozen goods.
Right.
Well, that depends on what your freezer's set at,
Well,
too.
yeah.
If you got
How
minus
long you
10
took
on
them
a
out.
freezer
Yeah.
versus 0, that's 10 more degrees you got to nuke for.
Yeah, whether or not they have freezer burn and
Mm.
extra moisture. But it's really the same thing with audio, and that's the issue. There are definitely value options that are better than the rest in that range. And you see this more, especially at lower price points, where there are sort of obvious plays. And so I guess if you're in the lower price range, it's easier to kind of sort of just pick something based on recommendations or reviews from other people. But when you get to the higher end, it's much more difficult. It really is. Because not only do you tend to be more critical of these bits of gear, you tend to have more resolving gear around it. And it tends to be that the flaws are less significant. So the character could almost matter more in a lot of cases.
Especially with like a tube amp or something. It's like you want it to sound like a tube amp. You know?
You're looking for more of a particular sound.
Yeah.
It's funny though, like everybody's got a different idea of what that is.
Well, yeah, that's
like
true.
the old school tube amps were softer sounding. They rolled the top, so
Right.
people. I think a lot of people still think that's the way it is. But technically, today's tube amps are pretty similar to solid state. You
It
know?
can be, yeah.
See that, and that's really when you really get into the nitty gritty on separating the good from the bad amplifiers, because now we're talking about, subjectively speaking, how does it play music? Like, how's it do with string decay? Do strings sound strident and hard, or they sound natural? The harmonic structure. Amps affect harmonic structure of the music. I mean, all the electronics do, as does the speaker.
Pretty much everything does.
Yeah,
so.
right. But and that's the hard thing to gauge, because there's no measurement for that really. You can look at total harmonic distortion, but it really doesn't tell you. It's not going to tell you what it sounds like till you try it.
It's just complicated because that's a thing people look at, and I think there's merit in that for sure, but it's sort of the broad strokes. The trouble is it's effectively like looking at how much dissolved solids there are in your water. Great, you know what's in the water, right?
The question is, can you taste it?
You actually
At
don't,
what
though. The
point?
trouble is you know there's stuff in the water.
Yeah, right.
You don't know what the actual makeup
So
of
now
that
paranoia
stuff is.
takes over.
So it could be, well, the reality is it could be that this stuff doesn't bother you. It could be totally benign. It could make the taste better in
Right.
cases.
Well,
True.
I mean, that's why you don't drink distilled water.
Yeah,
Because
that's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Even the
Right.
cats won't drink distilled water.
You see a lot of people, I've actually seen a lot of people now on social media talking more about this. There's that
Yeah.
water guy on like TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that.
Well, a lot of amps are like distilled water. They actually
Yeah.
they actually strip harmonic information in some respects. You tend to see that with a lot of negative feedback, which again is a complicated term. Although that's a whole different topic altogether. But a lot of that's the trade-off. You use a lot of negative feedback to reduce distortion, but at the same time, the amp sounds more sterile. And you'd see that with the ability, if you had the ability to change feedback in an amp, which
Here we
most
go.
people don't.
This
We
keeps-
talked about that
This
too.
keeps coming up. you
Yeah,
know?
but there is one that does it. I forgot somebody mentioned
Yeah.
it. But bottom line is that that's the difference between amps. So now the only way to know that really is either you got to know somebody that has the same taste and system as you, and if they say, "Hey, this
Good
is great,"
luck.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
good luck, yeah, right, or you got to try it, and or if you talk to somebody really like if you called us, we'd be able to walk you through that. What are you after? What are your tastes? What are you listening to? And I think most of the manufacturers in the high end, or the dealers too, same deal. If the dealer should be able to answer that question. If your salesman you're talking to doesn't know that answer, then you need to ask somebody else the question. Like what, this is what I'm after. This is, especially if you're like, say, like I think between amplifiers, like the people that ask me questions, right? They're trying to get me to explain to them what it sounds like. And to put that in words takes a half hour, and even then you don't really know. You're trying to paint a visual picture of the sound.
But you could make almost anything sound good that way.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily mean you like it. That's the
Right.
trouble. And the reality is some people like the clinical sound. There's no fault in that. That's perfectly acceptable. Some people don't know what they like.
Right.
And that's where the difficulty comes in. So some people, obviously distilled water is great. Other people, they like spring water. It's the same thing. People have preferences.
It does get harder at the top. Because, if you are experienced and you've been through all this, you're gonna have to hear it. You got to try it. It's the only way you're really gonna know, if it's gonna be a keeper or not. Because the reason is because you've already heard everything else. So like, what the hell's gonna impress you at that point?
It's a surefire way if you try it all. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, right.
But
Well, yeah.
unfortunately, it is very difficult to do.
That's the beauty. Like we got a can jam coming up in New York City, and toward the end of February. This
Yep,
next
we'll be
month.
there. Yep.
Bring
Yeah.
your headphones, try everything out.
Yeah.
Try everything.
That's a great place to try stuff.
A little loud.
You
Maybe
know?
come really early.
Yeah.
There's not that many people
Well,
there.
not
It's
too
quiet.
early. We might not be there yet.
Okay, come in at 4 a.m.
Oh yeah.
Be there to blow down the gate when they open.
Yeah, right. Have your headphones ready, your ears ready.
Yeah.
Wait, that's right. Make sure you get a quiet room at night so when you
Oh,
wake up,
good rest.
your ears are rested. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't go outside into New York City and make in the noise, But anyway, yeah. And so New York, if you haven't figured that one out yet, get a ticket, go, because that's like if you're going to be spending thousands of dollars on a setup, a ticket to New York City is pretty cheap
Well, depending where you're
to be able
coming
to
from.
try all this. Well, that's true.
But
From
there's
here, yeah.
trade shows all over, so
Yeah.
hopefully you could wait it out and wait for one near you.
Yeah, in fact, they're having a Can Jam this year in Florida or something
Texas?
like that. Texas? Yeah, I don't know. They're
One of
moving
those,
a
yeah.
new one somewhere. Yeah, I got to look into
Yeah,
that.
somewhere in Texas.
Yeah.
I'd like to do that.
Yeah, so. But yeah, you're right. Shows exist. People even do meets where they get together and you're in a certain town and say, hey,
Yeah.
you got to go to like headfi.org and check
Great
out
option.
the forum. Yeah, they list when they're having, personal meets. They might have 10,
Another
15
option,
people.
if you're a little less timid, there's also people on the forums that are oftentimes very excited and willing to let you try their gear.
Yeah, that's true.
So you could, if you want to give it a try, you could contact people and say, hey, can I swing by?
Is anyone in
Can you
Houston
bring
that
your
has
thing
this?
here? I'll meet you in a parking lot and we'll do a shady
See,
transaction.
but that's actually even better because then not only can you hear for yourself, but you could also have someone that's experienced this
Yeah,
for a
that's
long
used it
period of
before.
time.
Yeah.
How they
And might
liked
have
it.
tried other things
Yeah.
already. So they
Right.
could say, well, don't waste your time with that because
Right.
that's what this sounds like.
Yeah.
But
This-
of course,
Yeah.
be aware everybody has limited experience. Everyone you talk to has limited experience. So it is very difficult without trying everything for yourself to be certain. But as long as you're comfortable with the chance that you might make a mistake, as long as you think it's part of the discovery and learning process, that's kind of the best way to go. Learn for yourself. Try
Yeah.
it out.
But to me, that's to me the biggest difference when you're picking out an amplifier, whether it's good for you or bad for you, is how does it sound?
It's also the hardest one to figure out.
The hardest
That's
one.
a tricky one.
Yeah, because you really got to know what it should sound like, so to speak, or what you want it to sound like, and that's a personal preference thing. It's kind of like food. It's
like
like
anything.
it's like
Yeah.
your taste.
Right.
There's a
It's-
reason why you would like one thing over another. Other people might say it's worse, but
It's like art.
so
You look at some people look at art and they don't see
Yeah.
why the hell you spend that much on a painting or whatever.
Right.
And some people go, whoa, I got to have that. So it's
But
kind of the same
to
thing.
clarify, there is certainly a point that some people are interested in having that clinical flat sound, what you might call reference. And there's certainly reasons for that. But if your pure intent is musical enjoyment, listening enjoyment, then you don't need to be super neutral and super flat. You could have a little skew that generally will make it sound quite a lot better. To most
Yeah, the
people.
word is fun.
right.
Yeah. If you talk to someone who say, I want an amplifier that's fun, Spirit Sky will know exactly where to go.
It could be a pretty big difference, though. Right? It can be so much more engaging to a
Yeah,
lot of
totally.
people. We see this at trade shows all the time. And I guess to clarify, we're not really speaking directly about ourselves. It's more or less our experience with the average of people that we see at shows. Right?
What
So
do they
it's-
look for?
What do we see people see that seems to get them stuck? And yeah, a lot of people, in fact, most people seem to like fun, enjoyment. And that seems to be what this sport is about. Seems to be what headphone hobby is kind of sort of into. So
Well, that is the thing, though. At a show, they've already took that step. They're already enthusiastic going
Yeah.
to shows, so they already kind of probably know what direction they want to go in. So at shows, people are usually already kind of have an
you
idea.
get a lot of outgoing people that have been
Yeah.
around the block over at shows.
Yeah.
Right. And you can meet
Good to
people
talk
like
to,
that too.
yeah. A lot of experience.
New York City in particular is a fun show to do. Those people.
Well, it's
something
nice that
about New Yorkers.
It's close for us.
They're
That's-
very into it.
That helps too.
Yeah, they're into the guys that are showing up at the Can Jams are pretty serious.
Pre-COVID, that was our best show.
Yeah.
Right? It was always
It was fun.
great.
It was fun for us
so busy. It was easy to do.
as exhibitors.
Yeah, the people
Well,
were great.
50-minute flight, but then a 50-minute cab ride.
Yeah. It averages out.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
We'll see how it
Hopefully-
goes this year.
Yeah, hopefully we're going to see some of you there. We'll be there. We'll have a booth. There's a number of other vendors that'll be using our headphones there.
Mhm.
So, we'll do a video. We'll do a video before the show.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah,
talk
we got
about
some
it.
time.
Yeah. So, hopefully that kind of helps a little bit with figuring out what you're doing with amplifiers.
Gives you a
and-
little thought process.
Yeah. But by all means, I think you're best if you're unsure, talk to somebody. Call a few people.
Start the process for
Average-
yourself.
Average out their responses and see where you'll narrow it down. Better
Right.
than throwing a dart at it.
Well, you could do that too, but
Yeah, that's the expensive way to go.
It's an expensive way.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. Thumbs us up and take care.